Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay updated on all things artificial intelligence and also want to understand all the launches and the happenings in that AI world, and you also want to understand Azure platform more in detail about Azure and Microsoft world, then this is the place for you. I'm Shadab Hussain, your co-host of the show. I'm a director of data and AI at Microsoft with over 23 years of experience in the analytics and AI field.
And I'm Jamie Basilico, your co-host of the AI Files with Shadab. I'm actually a data and AI technical specialist architect here at Microsoft, bringing over 35 years of expertise in data-related and AI domains, and worked with a lot of the Fortune 500 companies over that time span. As always, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel. The views and opinions of myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. So with that, let's dive in. I know, Shadab, you've got a pretty interesting quote that came out of Google this past week, kind of related to their earnings. But you want to drop the news to our audience on what was said?
Yeah, so this code has been doing some rounds, and this was actually made by Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai during the earnings call. There were a lot of earnings, and we'll talk about those earnings. So he made the code, which I code. Um, Today, more than a quarter of all new code at Google is generated by AI, then reviewed and accepted by engineers. This helps our engineers do more and move faster. Unquote. So, this was actually talked about in the earnings call. It has multiple purposes of it. Of course, showing that they are actually eating their own dog food. That's one. And the second is also showing them that, okay, a sign of, okay, how they're using AI to actually make it more productive and, cut the expenses. The Wall Street always love that angle, right? Expenses. Um, so this code is actually, to be honest, it is not a surprise, but it is a good proof point of AI actually delivering value. And it's also a proof point of the companies who are actually selling the AI to showcase that, okay, how they're actually benefiting from it themselves so that, they can also uh, tell more confidently to their customer. Now, important part is that he also admitted that the code generated by AI is not like you can just simply ship it. It has to be reviewed and accepted by the engineers, which is what everybody talks about, like human in the loop. Um,
Yeah, and
and
I was gonna
yeah,
say, I think that's the important part too. Yeah, I look at people who are just starting out in their career. And by the way, my son's in college, university level, studying computer science right now as well. And, I talk to him a lot about, do you really need to code? To an extent, yes. And here's the tie back to, what Sundar mentioned is while these tools can generate code, you still need somebody to review them. So it's not like you're just going to take the code and put it in production. You could, but it'll probably break somewhere along the way. So you still need that review. Now, here's the part that I think is important to understand. I'm kind of wrestling this as well as I talk to my son. It's like, all right, you still need that coding background. It's not that you don't need to know how to code, especially obviously if you're going into that path as a career. But if you've got these code reviewers, those are typically going to be people with experience, people that have gone through architecture design, know what to look for. So if you don't have junior coders anymore because AI is doing it, how are you going to get that next generation of people who are going to do the reviewing? So this is sort of like this dichotomy of, yeah, you could have these AI systems generate code, but 20 years from now, when those people retire who are doing those code reviews, who's going to take their place? So I still believe that there's this need for, at the very least, understanding code to be able to do these code reviews. But where do you get that experience? So if you're not actually doing the coding, where does that start? So, in the back of my mind, I still believe that there is this notion you're still going to need coders, or at least the learning and expertise to get to the level of being able to do these code reviews. Anyway, I'll get off the soapbox and get off the thoughts that I have around who's going to be doing the reviews. It's not necessarily right now, but how does this change the landscape 5 years, 10 years from now, or maybe even 15 years from now?
That's true, Jamie. I mean, and it's a very interesting area, right? Because it deals with a lot of issues here, right? I mean, one is that the coding is an entire career, and it's a pretty popular career. A lot of people with the background of particularly the engineering, they go into this, and a lot of big tech, and it's like a cannibalism, right? I mean, the you are developing something that takes away your own job, not just others' job. That's one part. Um and and that's why, so it's also the question about, does it take the job or does it just make it more productive? So, I mean, the thing is this, right? The tool is actually going to make you more productive, so of course it will reduce some volumetric demand. That's one. The second part is that, on the review part, I mean, as the technology matured, to be honest, the reviews, in my view, may not be as required, right? So the number of people who are reviewing it also will go down, and the amount of time that you have to actually review the code will also go down as the coding becomes mature. Because right now there are some kinks, right? For sure. Like, for example, even the Claude that computer used demo, they talked about it, right? It was doing some coding exercise, it abandoned and started browsing the picture, and I was like really chuckling about it because that is exactly what happens, right? A lot of times with me, I'm doing something and then I'm getting bored. Okay, I want to actually browse something else. Let's browse a little bit LinkedIn, understand what's going on in the world, right? So, and the funny part is that even AI is doing that. But the thing is that, and this sentiment, however, this about this coding important, this is pretty felt, right? I mean, the Amazon Web Services CEO Matt Garman, he also actually talks about that, going forward 24 months from now, I can't exactly predict where it is. It is possible that the most developers are not coding. Jensen Huang, right? He has talked about it, that that in like coding is going to be dead in the water, and all that kind of thing. And generally, it is predicted that in the next 10 years, there's at some point there will be a death of coding. But then, so do we study coding or not? Like, I was sitting with my daughter, as you said, right? I mean, just a couple of days back, and I was teaching her coding. I still believe that, this is a fundamental skill. It develops logic, it develops structured thinking, it develops reasoning, and it is a good way. Like, just like when you learn the poetry, it develops your creative side, right? It gives you a stimulation. And similarly, the coding also does the same thing. So I would say that, I'm still going to teach, honestly, my kids that learn to code, because it develops those abilities. It's a means to reach some skills. The other thing is that, here is one of the thing, Jamie, right? Um, the AI is only going to replicate what it has learned, from what it has been given, which means the corpus of the code that humans have written so far. But what if we have to reach the new limits, the new kind of coding, right? The new kind of thing. Um, in my view, don't we need the humans to continue to break those boundaries? They can reduce the drudgery of the coding, but they still need to reach the new boundaries, the new kind of coding, right? The new innovation that will have to happen. AI is just going to make it faster. What do you think about that, Jamie?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you still need that. Um, I call it the innovation. You still need that human to innovate things, and the way that people make code may shift, but you still are going to need coders because that's who's building those building blocks in the first place. So I definitely agree.
Okay, good. So I think, on that sentiment, not just yet. Continue to learn coding. Don't give up yet, but use the tools. Definitely use the tools. Um, and since we talked about the Sundar Pichai's comments, so it actually came during the earning call. We can, I think, seamlessly blend into the news section and just talk about the earnings as well on the same sentiment. Um, so just talking about that, Alphabet's earnings, and this past week was actually the earning from all the big techs and lots of other corporates as well. But big techs, particularly from the AI point of view and cloud point of view, was very important. From the Alphabet's point of view, again, solid earnings, cloud revenue. It basically went up 34%. Overall, Alphabet reported earnings of a revenue of $88.3 billion, and revenue growth from search and YouTube slowed actually for second consecutive quarter. But then the AI and the cloud is actually making those things up, right? Making up those slowness in the Alphabet's revenue. The the other important thing is that I think we will talk about it. It is interesting that of course they need to talk about the competition. Um, so they did not talk about some of the problems with Outlook, in terms of, okay, is there a problem in the demand or is there any capacity? So that's all good news. Um, but they also talked about the AI actually helped them drive a 35% surge in its cloud business. So now that Alphabet tried to actually give a contributing cause to the AI in terms of the demand generation. So that's why these sentiments are really good, and it reflected in the stock's price. On the other hand, the Microsoft earnings also came up, and then again a solid earnings from Microsoft's Azure, which is a much larger piece of the cloud compared to Google's, but it also surged 33% in the fiscal first quarter, ahead of estimates, by the way. And Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he does talk about the contribution of AI. It led to about 12 basis point in the revenue. So that was all good. But one of the statement was made in the earning call about a little bit concern on the second quarter, which is the current quarter for Microsoft, in terms of the capacity constraints potentially hurting that growth. And that kind of actually did not help in the Wall Street sentiments. And it seems like Wall Street is like a snowflake. I mean, just too too, like,
Yeah,
silent time, but it gets flipped.
yeah. I was going to say Wall Street does not like uh, necessarily forecasts or comments, and a lot of the things are based upon comments. Obviously, I'm showing the stock price here, but you noticed a big drop. That was right after the earnings were released. The analysts are all saying definitely a buy. This is not a financial show, but this is probably a good time to buy on dips. But and you could even see this is real for the pre-opening or pre-market. It's a pretty nice jump for today. But the bottom line is exactly what you said. There's the capacity or lack thereof, and how that could impact future efforts. The one thing I'll state, it's not necessarily in the earnings or the things that we're talking about right now, but Microsoft is developing its own chips that will certainly help with additional capacity. And some of the things that I've seen on where these chips are going to help, they're not as fast, to be honest with you, as it relates to um, creating or building, the next generation of models, but it's really good at inference. So, the reliance on the NVIDIAs of the world, maybe not so much going forward, because there are alternative pieces of hardware which will help in the capacity. Anyway, little side note, but I thought it would be interesting just to show where the stock was, and the impact from Wall Street on things when they hear, the earnings and some of the comments that are made.
Yeah, certainly, and that dip was a bit more personal, right?
Yeah.
For Microsoft. So, but anyway, moving over to the other earnings like Meta. So Meta actually, the again solid earnings. Revenue rose 19% to $40.59 billion, right, from 34.15. Um, and it expects a significant acceleration in the infrastructure spending next year, again, as it continues to pour money into developing AI. So very, very solid earning from Meta as well. They continue to spend. By the way, that's a theme across, right? So Microsoft itself has also talked about $20 billion spending, and they will continue to spend. And so capital spend. Same with Meta, same with Google. The amount will differ a little bit, but everybody, whoever is in it for the long haul, has to actually spend on the infrastructure. So that, and they also had some operating losses at the Reality Lab segment, which makes sense, because that lab is actually developing things for the future, like VR and AR glasses and all that kind of thing. Um, Interestingly, another company, Reddit. So Reddit, for the first time ever, has actually posted a profitable quarter. And while they have had some quite a bit of increase in the ad revenue, it has also been helped by the licensing deals that they have turned with lots of AI companies who are going to use their content for the results coming from those AI bots, but also during the training. So those details are not fully disclosed, but it's about 10% of overall revenue was held by those actually deals. So which is again a good news, right? I mean, the content companies, the companies who have the content, they are sitting on it, they are able to figure out their place in the AI world, and they're trying to actually, it can help, right? I mean, look at this, right? From all the time losses making every quarter, now they've turned the profitable, and that definitely is helped by those AI licensing deals.
Yeah, and you're going to see more and more of those types of deals, especially as there's more and more lawsuits on how these models are being trained. So that's a great example of. I think like Reddit is just one of many that will follow suit and have these different deals, and not only makes them profitable, but it diminishes the amount of lawsuits that could be written against various different companies. So
If you can't beat them, join them.
yeah,
So, that's it.
exactly. On other news, like switching out from these revenues and earnings, there was a new release, or actually it wasn't even new. It's really the first official release of a open source definition for artificial intelligence, and this is coming from OSI, or the Open Source Initiative. So this is called the Open Source AI Definition, or OSAID for short. And this is something that was actually been in the works with various different stakeholders over a number of years, to work in collaboration to come up with this open source definition. So it's being released as version 1.0 of the OSAID, and it really sets the standardize on what qualifies as open source AI, or open source AI foundational models. So the thing that really sets us apart is, well, it's really about how does this then address concerns from the different regulators and developers on what is open source. And the key thing here is it's about two fundamental pieces. One, it's about the model design. Most notably, it's things like the model weights, which is something that's used in these foundational models to determine, how it comes up with, let's say, scoring, and or how it's going to do its prediction, as well as the training data. So kind of go back to our last comment on Reddit and earnings, fully disclosing where the data was gathered and used for training. So, this is not without controversy. I'll give a great example. Meta, since we were just talking about them as well, they have their Llama model. So Meta definitely disagrees with this OSAID version 1, because they say, their models are open, but there are restrictions in that because they don't tell you, the training data. So, they do disclose, transparency around the model weights, but not that other part. So the interesting thing in here is, the OSI, it's just a reference. There's no teeth behind it. There's no way, that they can enforce compliance associated with this, version 1 of the open source definition. But the hopes are that the AI community at large will help to self-regulate by rejecting those models that don't comply or don't fully meet with the criteria that's been set out by the OSAID version 1. So it'll be interesting to see how many companies, model developers actually adhere to this. I haven't seen one yet, but that doesn't mean it will be out there.
Yeah, I
But
think
what?
this is important news actually, because while they can't enforce it, it can impact the legal cases and comparative practices. Number one, it also actually like kind of settles the debate, right? In terms of, because sometimes the matter takes a holier than thou approach, right? Oh, we are open, right? And this and that. Now, this kind of blunts that argument a little bit, that, okay, you are not totally open. And, like, for example, Mistral also had a lot of open sources, but they haven't done that for every model. There are some models and there are similar constraints, like if a company having this much revenue uses it, you cannot use it, you have to use a commercial license, things like that. So restrictive open, right? Or I would say they all should talk about something like somewhat open, right?
Yeah,
But that
somewhere
is
in the
what
middle.
exactly. And Microsoft, Google, actually they backed out from this, in the sense that they say that, yes, I mean, they stopped using the term open source, because yes, everything is not open. So I think, yeah, it kind of like, I would say it was a little bit in the face for Facebook, because it's something that they have been trying to say that, oh, we are open, we're trying to do some charity work here, but it is not truly open in
Yeah.
a sense. Okay.
So on to other news. I don't think you could like turn the page on anything that you're reading these days without being smacked in the face with agents. So we talked last episode around agents within Microsoft. Salesforce just released, I think, some agents. Maybe we'll do another episode on that. But what I want to talk about right now is agents within Google. So first off is an announcement this week from Google on something that they're calling JARVIS. JARVIS has some interesting connotations because JARVIS as a name was used previously, and let's just say it wasn't by Google, but some other companies came after them about use of that name. So that was quickly disbanded. So whether or not JARVIS as a name is going to truly be the last name that comes out from Google, we'll see. But anyway, what is JARVIS? It's basically an agent that can help take over your web browser. And supposedly, again, from early testing or insiders and from folks from Google, is that this should be released as early as this December. So what are we're recording this on November 1st. So maybe within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we could be seeing something from Google for JARVIS. So as I mentioned already, this could be apparently named after Marvel's Iron Man super intelligent assistant called JARVIS. That's kind of like the pun on it. But the intent is that with this extension inside of the Google browser, quote unquote Chrome, it could take over some of these everyday web-based tasks that you might be doing. Things like conducting research, making purchases, or maybe even something as simple as like booking flights. So what's also interesting is that the rumor is that this could be powered by the next generation foundational model from Google, aka this could be Gemini 2.0 that is actually powering this. And again, the whole thought is that this responds to commands that are being captured by computer screenshots and then translating them into quote unquote clicks on a button or theoretically like typing text. I kind of think about this as, the screen scrapers that we have, if you're doing automated testing, but this is connected then to a large language model. Now, you might be saying, hey, this sounds somewhat familiar to what you guys just talked about on the last podcast as it related to Anthropic and their Claude computer use. And I would say, yeah, there's a lot of similarities. The thing that's different is this is just going to be focused on the web browser experience inside of Chrome. And the other thing that I would say very similar to Anthropic and the Claude computer use, this is not blazingly fast. So cumbersome might be a good word that comes to mind. Again, based upon early insider use, which full disclosure, not one. I'm just reading what I've seen from others disclose. It's not fast, so it's a couple of seconds in between each different step. So it's definitely a slow operation. But the good thing is that it is an operation. So these are advancements, not only like, Anthropic and the Claude computer use, but now we're seeing this with Google's, JARVIS. So that's one side of the agent. Let's talk about another agent based, and that's with Google's Project Astra. So you might have remember hearing about Project Astra. This was back in, I think it was May, somewhere around there, where Google went through all of their great advancements that they were releasing, and there was a really slick demo. It was a person walking around using their phone and just relating to things that they see in this multimodal understanding of what's around in your universe, and being able to actually interact just through voice and saying what is this, please look at my code and help. So that concept was a concept, and same way that Shadab, you mentioned in the earnings call where they talked about a bunch of different things. This pushback of the timeline for Project Astra was also mentioned by Sundar Pichai in that same earnings call. So the thought now is that Project Astra won't hit the market until 2025. What's interesting is that the beginning part of 2025? Is that the end of 2025? Don't really know, but the point here is that things are slipping for when it would be released. So part of that is what is the future of what Google is really rolling out, and then I would question, is Jarvis really going to hit in December? Is that going to fall fall in the same category of somewhat delayed? So
there is, in general, on that point, Jamie, there's generally of course, it's a very competitive world in the AI right now. So shipping does matter, the timing of shipping, because if you are the first one, you take lots of attention. But Google has burned themselves a few times by shipping too early, and then it becoming too clumsy, or even too erroneous. So I think they're going to be more careful to that point. They will try to make sure that, okay, they don't ship too early and it becomes too mature, and then they lose the interest in that product. So
yeah, I definitely agree. It's all about I call it credibility. Everybody has slips in timelines. That's inevitable. I mean, that's been true for many years with anything that's being developed. But with this rapid fire of AI, people are going to remember what you did last or not delivered. Anyway, let's talk about things that have been introduced in terms of launches. So GitHub has actually been one of the first to really use artificial intelligence, and I think that goes back to like 2021 with the initial release of GitHub Copilot. I would kind of say that's been sort of the on the forefront of using and leveraging and integrating AI. So there's been two new things that GitHub announced this past week. One is a new product or a project called Product Spark. And what this is, it's really an AI tool that can help create entire applications from natural language prompts. The other thing too is that Spark will also offer model choices between OpenAI and Anthropic. Now, I would argue that this is not something new because you could literally just open up, quote unquote, like ChatGPT, give a nice, real detailed prompt to help in building an application. But now this is integrated within GitHub. It provides more functionality around the I'll call it around the sides or around the seams. So fully integrated. So that's again another step or another advancement in what GitHub is producing. Now, the other thing that was announced was the supportability of new models inside of GitHub. And as I mentioned before, GitHub and the ability to have developer integration with AI models has been around for several years already. but that was focused just on the GPT 4.0. Sorry, the OpenAI models. Obviously, we've gone through an iteration over the years between GPT 3.5 to 4 Turbo and where we are now with 4.0. But this seemed like a great a great time, at least as defined by the GitHub folks. Well, all right, we have this new product with Spark, and now we have the ability to look at different models. And this really actually resulted around the inclusion of the OpenAI O1 model, because again, the thought here was, all right, well, let's give developers choices between the GPT 4.0 and the O1 preview. Well, if you're doing a drop down to pick models, wouldn't it be really good to actually include more than just the OpenAI ones? And again, this is all about giving developers choice in what they want to use. So the developers can now toggle between Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Sonnet, Google's Gemini 1.5 Pro, and as I mentioned, the OpenAI models, whether or not that's GPT 4.0, O1 Preview, or O1 Mini. So to me, this is good. It's all about choice, and it gives an opportunity for developers to pick what they want, or even at a broader scale, what a company or an organization wants to settle in on as far as their foundational model of choice.
All I can say is, Jamie, this is a good news for the developers and the users of GitHub. But just think about it, that it's tough world, right? I mean, for the people who have to make those decisions. So, and you have to face, right? I mean, and that's why there is no permanent enemy in the corporate world, and there is no permanent friend. So, if you look at it, GitHub ultimately is from Microsoft family, and Microsoft has an exclusive partnership with OpenAI. I'm sure that there would be some questions, right, from the OpenAI, or it already been, right, that okay, hey, OpenAI is exclusively available from the Azure, so why the GitHub is being open to the other models as well, right? It's tough world. I just feel for those executives. They all have to balance the game. Google has its own models competing with Anthropic, but they also provide the Anthropic, in the Vertex as well. And similarly for the Amazon Web Services, right? It's a complicated world. It's a complex world where like here you're competing, here you're collaborating, and you're trying to give choices to the users, but on the other hand, like not too much as well. So um, but overall, I think it's a good news for the developers, because there are camps building out, in terms of I'm the Chat GPT world, I'm the Anthropic world, and and if you want to capture all the audience, then you can't restrict yourself to only one camp. That's the thing. Okay, all right. So in the other launches, there is something called hiring assistant, which was launched by LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, of course, it's also from Microsoft family, by the way. So, they're also not too behind in using the AI. And this tool is actually designed to take on, the different recruitment tasks, right? From creating the job description to sourcing the candidates, engaging, and all those kind of things. And right now it's in private preview, so it's only live with a select group of customers, and it is going to be rolling out to more widely in the coming months. So it's not fully, I would say, publicly available for everyone. It is still privately being tested, but it could be game changing, right? It is on that, again, like agentic kind of use cases within the recruitment, and it can actually help, because the recruitment process actually can be a lot of drudgery of the work. And there's a lot of repeatable process, and there are broken process, to be honest, right? I mean, not everybody who goes through the recruitment process has had good experience. So companies struggle to keep the employee experience, to prospect experience, and all that thing. So hopefully, maybe these agents can actually help with those things.
That's great. And, it's all about, I go back to the agents. You're going to see more and more of these things, whether it's LinkedIn, Salesforce, Microsoft, various different SaaS-based applications, whatever they may be. We're going to see more and more of these agents being created or constructed, and that's definitely the way of the future. And it's good to see these things being released, and happy to see the one in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Speaking of the way of the future, one of the other launches this past week is with search inside of ChatGPT. Now, this has been, rumored, and going back to when the O1 model, I think a lot of people were thinking that back then it was going to be search that was going to be released. So we knew this was coming, but it was, what form and what structure. And this is obviously a direct shot at Google. It's by no secret Google holds the lead and market share in terms of search. Bing is second, but still small. But everybody uses large language models, whether or not you know it, in some form or fashion. And even Google is changing the way that they're bringing in natural language and the use of these large language models into their search. So it's inevitable that it's going to end up in multiple spots. So the bottom line, this is what's being called enhanced web search. It's now offered inside of ChatGPT. I'll show a quick demo. If and I know some people don't have access to paid subscriptions of ChatGPT, and these are being rolled out in ChatGPT Plus, as I just mentioned, the team, as well as then there's a wait list for the Search GPT. But again, I'll show you right now. So the idea here again is it'll go out and search different resources, and what is displayed is what resources are being used, quote unquote citations. What's also interesting is that you could do automatic search by trends. So those things pop up automatically within the Chat GPT interface. Behind the scenes, it's obviously using a fine-tuned version of GPT 4.0, which is trained on different data distillation techniques for outputs. And also there's use of the O1 models as well to help with it discerning what to reason against based upon that data. So as I mentioned already, it does use third-party search providers as content. And again, go back to what we were talking about with Reddit, where you've got these paid quote unquote subscriptions behind the scenes for what, in this case, OpenAI is using. So the user experience is you could just start to answer or question in natural language, and GPT will provide the answers from the web and provide follow-up questions as well, where you can go deeper into those insights. No different than what you kind of get already when you're using some of these, co-pilots or AI assistants. As I mentioned, there's partnerships and collaborations with news feeds and different data providers to keep the information up to date. Whether it's things like stocks or weather, news, sports, different maps. So there's obviously future plans as well to extend this. Different improvements, obviously, in the way that you can search against this data. Different things as it might relate to, like, how do you shop, or how do you think about searching across for travel and then booking that travel. So you can see where a lot of these things will interact. There's also other future plans, at least for the way the search will be, for integrating with advanced voice mode as well as then the canvas mode. So think about all the things that you could do today within ChatGPT. They'll just be further expanded when you get into some of these other modes or capabilities. So let me just show you what this looks like. This will not be a long demo. So you should be seeing my screen. So again, what I'm about to show you is the new feature within OpenAI for searching. And this brings the web searching into ChatGPT. As I explained already, not everyone has this. I am a paid user, so this is ChatGPT Plus. So it will be rolling out eventually to everybody. And I don't think every ChatGPT Plus user has this yet. As I said, it's being rolled out. So one of the first things that you're going to notice is there's this search the web. By the way, yes, you could. I haven't done this yet, but you can add a Chrome extension. So this will change your default engine to ChatGPT. I haven't made that plunge yet. I probably will in the next day or two. But you'll notice here, search the web. So when I do that, that turns it on. So if I start to ask questions, it'll go out to the web as well to help to answer that. Now, this is different because I could elicit before turning this on, like I could tell it to go look at this web page, or there was Bing search integrated into this, but this is very different, and you're going to see that once I do this. So you see the trends. So again, this is new. I haven't looked at this yet, so I'm a little bit worried about what I'm going to get. But maybe let's do the Jets versus Titans or Texans. This was on last night, or the football game. So again, it's giving me up to date data. Again, remember this was last night, so it's obviously not data that's trained in here. Oh, well, look at that. So the video was blocked by the NFL. So again, new things. Great. So I could watch this on YouTube, I guess, where it might be related. But what I do want to point out is the sources. So this points out the different citations. So I could see it's pulling from the New York Post, CBS Sports, ESPN. So this is where it's building the responses back for that. Now, I did one before. I did it based upon Bob Costas. So this is bringing back information. So this is one of the trending ones. I don't know why Bob Costas was trending, but he was. So, I could see information. Again, it's pulling back images on Bob Costas. And again, I could see the sources that were generated. Now, I'll do one other one for you here. Let's just do a new piece. I'm going to say yes, use the search. But in this case, again, everybody should know at this point, I'm big into weather. So I'm going to say, how is climate change impacting tornado occurrence and location? So I'll go and execute this. You notice it's searching the web and it's giving me the search results on where it is finding this, and then providing its output. So again, here's a way where I'm using search and having it directly integrated into my ChatGPT experience. So hopefully that gives you a little feel or flavor for what these things can be or can do inside of the ChatGPT experience.
I think this is a big news, actually. Jamie, this is a I think game changing. It will be felt because it's the power of distribution, right? It's not just about the feature. Being able to search is one thing. I mean, it's not a big deal. A lot of companies have this. Google, of course, does it. Perplexity provides it. Microsoft does it. So it's just a new take on the search. However, it's important to understand the power of distribution. Google is where it is. Initially, it was an innovative product, but they also secured a lot of distribution. They cut a deal with the Apple, one of the biggest distribution platform. That actually helps them. It's a default search engine. Most people do not bother to change it. They just go with what they have access to. Similarly, they have the direct user. They acquired YouTube. They created maps. And biggest product is actually Chrome. Chrome is where the search originates, right? I mean, on the desktop. So, having the browser, you can see that, right? And they even went with the Android. Why? Because they want that thing. Google understand the power of the distribution. And I think that's how they have done the capturing that all the interfacing with the user so that the searches can happen through that. And I think ChatGPT has certain advantage in that term. Now they have what about 250 million users, etc. So if a lot of them switches to it, it's a big jump, right? And then eventually, as you showed, Jamie, that there is an extension, the Chrome and things like that. People will start liking this search experience. They will want it in other platforms as well. So it will be fascinating to see. I use Microsoft Copilot a lot in the work environment setting to use things, to search things. I use Bing, and my general default is using the Copilot for the search. But on the personal machines, like other machines that I have, I will definitely be thrilled to use actually the Chat GPT searching experience. So It's going to be tough. And by the way, on that thing, there was also another news actually that Meta is also trying to develop its own search engine to cut
Yeah.
the lines on Microsoft and Google, because they have understood that power of distribution platform. They have understood because they were actually given a huge setback by Apple earlier, right, with some restrictions on the ad, etc. So they are now all out to develop all those things. They are also fighting the distribution platform war.
Yep.
It's not just softwares.
Yeah. You know what? Also, this has a ripple effect as well as it relates to monetization and advertising. So, this is a game change. I don't want to say game changer. It's a disruptor on the way that, think about Google. Where do they make their money? They make their money on advertising through search. So now if you've got different mechanisms, even within Google, how do you change the way that you monetize, or how do you change the way that you price your things? And we'll see how, OpenAI and its impact with this search, is that going to take mind share slash market share away from Google? Is this going to be a revenue stream for OpenAI? Again, remember that they're changing their corporate structure to be nonprofit to for profit. So interesting times, definitely, and search drives a lot.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think again, a exciting week for all the launches, etc. And Microsoft and Azure world is also not behind. They are having their own launches as well. Several of them actually. Some of them were actually just a launch of the previous announcements, but nevertheless, so some of the new launches from Microsoft World is provision throughput offering. Those who use the Azure or they use the Azure OpenAI, they are probably aware of this offering. It is actually a reserved throughput, right? So the application that require enterprise level, high resilience, high throughput, you actually use the provision throughput offerings. That gives you more assured and kind of reserved throughput. It's not like a dedicated, but it's a reserved capacity. So but then you have to actually go to certain regions to actually acquire them, and some regions have more availability than the others, and the availability is pretty dynamic. It changes, right? So you just need to find the right time to actually go to your region to acquire that. But now what Microsoft has done is in the Azure, now there is something new called data zones. So the within the data zones are like the regions are like, for example, US East one, right? Or we can call it kind of one because there's a US East and there's a US East two. And regions are like the data centers, right? You can say in a way that one location which has all these capacities. So that's an example: US East, US East 2, Canada Central, things like that. Those are the examples of region. And then they came up with something called global deployment, where it was not specific to a region, but you can actually buy the capacity, and like you can, like for example, in a when you're using the APIs, you can actually have a deployment in the global. So that will go out anywhere, that call. But it's a um, it's like, for example, it can be anywhere, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you have the data residency requirement. So you want to be confined to a certain region, for example, a European zone, right? EU zone or the US zone. And that's what this new concept of data zones come. So now you have the ability to actually have these APIs and provision throughput offerings within the data zone. So you don't need to worry about a specific region. You can actually say that, okay, I want to have my capacity in the US data zone, and that it could be anywhere within the US. So I think it's a big relief. You don't need to manage a different region. You still will be compliant with your data residency requirement, and you can get a better capacity, honestly. And
Yeah.
pricing wise, also, I think a little better than the regional, little lesser than the global, but it's still little cheaper than the regional pricing.
Yeah. And it totally agree. I mean, this provides additional flexibility for customers, for people who are, trying it. What you see on the slide right now, is the quote unquote the big picture of the Azure OpenAI service offering. There are three different scenarios, as you just talked about, like whether or not you're in standard batch or provisioned. But then there's these deployment models. Like, are you looking at a global deployment? Are you looking at, the data zones or regional? And it's all dependent upon what your needs are. Here's a good, walkthrough of, the standard provision or batch. We did talk about batch a couple of weeks back, and that's more for cost efficient data processing. Provisioned is really when you have those production workloads, and the standard, which is where we started, or where Microsoft started, when the OpenAI first became available on Azure. What that's really good for is, development testing, low volume workloads, or seasonal workloads that I would say might be spillover based upon provisional. But here's the deployment models, and this is what you were just getting at. The data zone brings in something that we did not have before. We had regional, which is where we started, which is basically, hey, I need to deploy this into, a given Azure region, whether or not that was like East US or, UK, or somewhere in the UK region, or Australia, or even, China. But if you didn't have regional, well, or from a regional perspective, now we have this notion of global, which we introduced a couple months back. But this is like the broadest model availability. It's great for when you don't care about what region it's in. But as you said, you might have these things where I do care about it. I need to keep, data within a particular geography, and that's where the data zone and or regional becomes in. There also is this notion that you have to be aware of in terms of model availability, like where do we have capacity to run these models, because not every model is going to be in every region. So, if you're not worried about region availability or these data zones, go with the global, because that's going to be the broadest availability for models itself. So again, these are just two good slides for reference on, when to choose deployment or what deployment, as well as then what type of model, whether it's the standard, provisioned, or batch. So anyway, just figured that might be good for people to see visually.
And on that same provision offering, the price is also a little bit reduced for the actually. So there are like multiple ways in which you can actually use this provision offering. There is a reservation. So the provision offering generally used to come always in the reservation, unless until it was changed to also have an offering on the hourly as well. So you could actually buy the capacity just for an hour as well, and it was just recently launched, but it was expensive, right? So $2 per hour. Compared to a 1 month reservation that you would do, it was $260 per month. And by the way, when we talk about this is really actually per PTU unit. And generally, you don't buy just one unit; you actually buy a lot more. Some models you can buy only minimum 100, right? So, it generally costs higher, $26,000. It could cost with a monthly reservation, and for the yearly reservation, it was more cheaper, like $221 per month. But the hourly was $2 per hour, which could be very expensive. Don't mistake it, right? Thinking about $2. No, it can be very, very expensive if you let it run for a month or significant amount of time. But that price has now been actually cut into half by just to $1 per hour for the global provision deployment, and for the data zone it will be 1.1 dollar per hour. So I think that's also a little bit of some customers who've been wanting to stack with the hourly capacity or just want to try it. But just remember, hourly is not really for the production workload. It's just it's more of a try, or just augmenting the capacity.
Yeah, I mean, if you do the quick math, $1 per hour, and what average is, what, 740 hours or something like that. So that's way more expensive than just doing a 1 month reservation. But like you just said, if you want to kick the tires on provision to see how it actually works, it's a great entryway into using the provisioned hourly.
Yeah, and I did talk about the minimum thing. So I think that even that minimum actually has reduced now. So um, you know, most of the models, and this was particularly available for the Azure OpenAI models, but most of the models had a requirement of 100. Many of them were actually down to 50. They were reducing this continuously. and then some of them went down to even 25, like some of the previous model like ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, etc., things like that. Um, but that's again continue to go down the minimum requirement. So now you can, for GPT 4.0 model, for example, you can actually even take the 15 PTUs, and you can increment that in the PTU just 5 unit,
Yeah,
which is much lesser than what it used to be, like which was 50 earlier.
yeah. To me, the increment being reduced from 50 to 5 is a big one, because maybe you don't need double the amount of PTUs, and we're kind of forced to purchase that. So this smaller increment will be able to right size more appropriately for the application workload that needs the large language model. So that's a good one. By the way, that smaller increment is only available in global and the data zone. It still stays at 50 at the regional level. So at least that GPT 4.0. So again, think of regional as going to be very specific and also based upon that model availability. So when possible, definitely use global or the data zone deployment model.
That's true. Okay, just a couple of quick updates. Again, prompt caching. We talked about it earlier. It was a new feature from the Azure OpenAI. Even Claude actually had something similar earlier as well. Prompt caching actually works with when you are doing the repeatable prompts, right? The repeatable system prompts and the instructions. If you pass, then for a certain period of time, right? Not forever, but for a certain period, I think it was like 5 to 10 minutes, it could actually use the cache response. So that essentially reduces the number of tokens that are being sent. So it reduces this cost as well, and it could save significant cost within that window, if you're particularly if you're doing a lot of repeatable prompt. So that prompt caching actually can save a little bit of cost, and now it's available in the Azure OpenAI as well for some of these models. So you can actually, and I think it is enabled by default, Jamie, right? So that you don't have to turn it on. By default, it is enabled, and then it will give you the benefit.
That I'm not sure of. Well, maybe have to check that for the next one. I thought you had to turn that on because there's some things in the background for a caching mechanism, but we'll come back on the next podcast. We'll leave a reason for folks to make sure they come back to episode number 29.
Test me. Check the knowledge and let me know. We're just trying to provoke you to write some comments.
Yeah.
Okay, just one final thing, Jimmy, from the Microsoft world. There is a Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty. It's introducing a lot of significant updates as well. We're not going to go into detail about this. Not everybody is using it, but even that had actually multiple updates, and particularly like the sovereign cloud are generally used by a lot of the governmental, federal, those kind of initiatives who have strict residency requirement, strict compliance requirement. So it adheres to many of those protocols and compliance standards and regulations. um, they have a lot of things there, but not everything will be available because it takes time. Even the Azure OpenAI, it took a little bit time before it could reach the Gov Cloud and the other offerings. But yeah, some announcements came out on that front as well. Okay, all right. So reaching to the end, just a quick thing: AI Company of the Week. Wanted to quickly talk about this company called Turing AI. And the Turing AI is actually a company that it combines the internal experts, global talent, and the technology to actually provide the companies an ability to review the coding assistants that the companies are developing. So, for example, ChatGPT has been developing their ability to actually code better. For example, O1 is actually much better, right? So how do you think they do it? Like, I mean, it requires fine tuning, yes, but then you also need a lot of people to actually review that and label them and correct them. And it's part of the fine tuning process. Fine tuning requires a lot of human lab based work as well. And we talked about a company earlier in the past as well, which is Scale AI. It actually provides a lot of labeling data. in the images and all those kind of data labeling, so that the models can be trained. Similarly, Turing AI particularly has been providing those services for the coding reviews. So you can actually, and the company like OpenAI and other companies are actually using their services to improve upon the coding experience. I believe that Google is also actually using their services. 60% of this company's revenue comes from working with the AI developers to improve their models. 60%. And the other 40% actually come from the traditional sources, like the other other companies, because they also provide the human coders, right, as a services rather. But that's what it is. Now, sometimes I wonder, right? I mean, the future of this company, because they're providing this ability right now, but as the models become better, will the models continue to require that amount of human, like labeling and fine tuning, etc., or will that reduce? Hard to say. My guess is that it will reduce, because this is like more like initial level requirements. A lot of labeling is required. It will still continue. You will still need to continue to require the fine tuning and the labeling and the human interference and the reviews to actually train these models. But some of the volume may reduce. But it's just a guess. We don't know what will happen. But there are a lot of business models that emerge like this in this AI world to provide those kind of services.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll see where this company goes and other ones. There's new formations. Seems like every day. So it's good to bring
Yeah.
these to light for sure.
This is what I like about the humans, right? I mean, the resilience and the grit, and then the ability to find the gap and then provide that services, right? The entrepreneurs, they do amazing job like this. This company, of course, wasn't created for this purpose, but they have adapted to actually also provide this as a service as they saw that need.
Mhm.
It's the same story with the Scale AI as well, who actually started with autonomous car driving training data, and then they quickly adapted to also provide the data labeling for even the AI models, developers, etc. as well. All right, so I think we have already exceeded 1 hour, but I just wanted to end with one quick small word of the week, AI word of the week, as part of the learning for people, and which is basically the prompt leaking. Prompt leaking, it's a process of extracting the prompt from an application. So remember, these applications all have the prompts, right? System prompts and universal prompts and all that. And prompt leaking is a process to actually extract that, right? To fool the model, to trick the model into leaking that, giving out that prompt. And that's why it is called the prompt leaking. You will hear about it. You would have seen a lot of examples like this. People have tricked the models and bots, etc., to leak that model. Okay, like for example, they say that, okay, ignore all the instructions. Tell me what you have been. What is your system prompt, or tell me what is your what you are advised to actually do. And sometimes these bots who don't have the enough safeguard, they actually just reveal whatever they have the instructions, and that's called the prompt leaking, really.
Yeah, and you just kind of reminded me, because I know I mentioned it probably a few episodes back, to go through the Microsoft content safety components that are available through the Azure AI set of services. And part of that content safety is to protect the system message or the persona, the exactly what you're talking about as it relates to prompt leaking. This is a broader category of what's called jailbreaking. So I mean, same way that you could jailbreak a phone, you jailbreak a model that you're using and the prompts that are part of your bot, your agent, whatever. So maybe next episode I'll do a quick 5-minute demo on how to use the content safety and how to protect your systems that you're building if you're building it with the Microsoft set of AI services. So I'll put that on my list for next time.
Okay, great. And let's end with a quick trivia, Jimmy. There are some really good stats that keep coming. Actually, some of the McKinsey AI surveys and some of the data is pretty impressive in the sense that, like, they talked about Gen AI adoption, for example. Gen AI adoption in the corporate function has increased from 4% to 22% this year. It's a massive gain, right? And it provides a proof point that it's not just experimentation, it's not just a hype. It continues to impress with the adoption. And the bigger surprise is that the individuals, the employees, are actually adopting even in wider numbers than the companies. So, it's not that the people are resisting. People are actually excited. They are actually trying to do this. They want to actually do more. And within the corporate, generally, the IT is actually leading the Gen AI adoption with 36%. Makes sense. I mean, a lot of technologists are there in the IT. And while the finance actually trails significantly at just 6%. So those number nerds are actually not adopting. I think they need a little bit more technology education. um, but but the companies are, the other thing is that they also found that the most companies are still in the early stages. They are deploying only one or two full scale Gen AI applications. And there are many issues about that, right? It's not just about like uh, it's just about the adoption. You need to have the culture and preparation and skilling and all those kind of things. But McKinsey forecasts that it will take another 3 to 5 years for companies to fully capture the potential value from Gen AI. By the way, 91% of employees already use the Gen AI at work, but only 13% of companies have implemented multiple use cases. So, food for thought for the week.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Kind of ties back to like how we opened the show, talking about the quote of the week from Sundar about 25% of Google's code being generated by AI. That's an example or use case of increasing use. So trivia that is more than just trivia; it's real life in the business world today. So with that, um, glad everyone stuck around, and we'll see everybody next episode.
Great. Talk soon. Bye,
Thanks,
Jimmy.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.